All right, and welcome to Practical Discipleship Wednesday. Thank you so much for being here. Really excited about what we're going to be discussing this evening. We're going to try to be as candid and as transparent and as G-rated as we could possibly be. So just we're going to be talking about intimacy in the context of marriage. So please bear with us. Try to read between the lines. I know we do have a varied audience this evening. So please be patient with us. As always, if you have questions or you have comments for our YouTube or our church online, we'll try to address those during the context of the service here. And if not, we can get to those, or you can talk to us personally. Thank you, Eric, for being here. Thank you, Dan. We are on week 5 of this, looking at some of the intricacies of marriage. There's only 1 or 2 weeks of focus, one more week to focus on marriage and relationship before we move on to the next topic. So if there's some aspects that you would really like us to cover, please leave in the comments, because next week is one of the last opportunities to deal with that. I know we've covered quite a few. If you've missed those, take a look at them, make sure we haven't covered them. And if you want us to cover them, let us know, and maybe we can work it into next week. So, Eric, we have 2 more scenarios that we want to go over again this evening.
Yes, sir. All right, so first scenario is Christian husband and wife of 15 years. They got 3 boys that are 14, 12, and 9. All 3 boys are active in sports and trail life, and the family spends most days of the week at either game, practice, or a trail life event. The husband has a full-time job and the wife has a part-time job. The wife's emotional needs are not being met. She feels like the marriage has become a series of logistic coordinations, all to support the activities. She's expressed this repeatedly and gets a couple days increased emotional connection from the husband, but it usually fades within about 72 hours.
Wow. Unfortunately or fortunately, that is reality. I mean, I think that is probably just described a lot of people either in this room or watching online. It can be so hectic. Dan, what are your thoughts? You want to jump into this? Or?
Well, if this were a couple sitting in front of me, or if this were one of my kids, because this sounds so real, this is so close to home, I would simply say, you just have to adjust your priorities and maybe even your expectations. There's nothing really wrong that is uncommon here. These are people who have taken on a lot. They're not new to the parenthood thing. They've got a 14-year-old,
right? So
it's not a new thing to them, and they kind of know what they've gotten themselves into. I'm sorry, there's not. This is not a sin problem. This is a priority problem. This is right. a making time, space, and priority for your mate kind of problem.
I'm just going to throw this out there. Christianity, I believe, is not a subculture in our culture. It is a counterculture in our culture. And if we don't treat it as, or we don't live as a counterculture, we'll find ourselves acquiescing and falling into the same pitfalls that our culture falls into all the time. I think it is a priority. Deuteronomy 24:5 says this. It says, when a man is newly married, he shall not go out with the army or be liable for any other public duty. He shall be free at home for 1 year to be happy with his wife, whom he has taken. Now, I wholeheartedly believe that this couple in this particular scenario and in this situation is because there wasn't that early on prioritization. And we get married, and the next thing you know, there's 3 or there's 4. Mm-hmm. And then there's all of the things that drive us as parents, as husband and wife. When we feel guilty or we feel ashamed, we compensate in very, very strange ways. And I'm going to throw this out there and tell you what I did, kind of what we did. We have 4 children, and we took a year off. We took a year off ministry to get to know each other. We kind of knew this in the Bible. We went through it. We kind of lived it. We established that it was always going to be her and I, whether we had kids, we didn't have kids. We were going to prioritize each other. My wife comes before my children. You say, well, that doesn't sound right. My wife comes before my children. She does. They're going to leave me and go do their thing at one point, and she's going to have to tolerate me, and vice versa. So we made this covenant called marriage beforehand, and we decided that we're going to prioritize those, not destroy that covenant that was something that was supposed to last before the season of children, during, and live on the other side of that season of children. All of my children, my youngest child at this point is 16. My oldest is 22. Something that we did because the world just demands so much time and energy. What if I would have had every one of my kids in sports? That's 4 different sports going on in a relatively short time, not just the time it takes for the sports, but the time it takes for the practices. What if they did violin or they did dance? We started out, we had 2 girls in dance, then we had violin. We had all of this stuff that was supposed to better our lives and bring value, and it was literally fragmenting our lives to the point that we were not enjoying our lives, and they weren't either. And by the time they got old enough to all kind of do that thing, we said, okay, we're going to be creative. We're going to find something that we can do all as a family on one day, and we're going to do that as a family on that day. We can't. Otherwise, we would literally have sacrificed going to church, following God, doing any type of ministry or outreach, on that throne or altar of obligation, because culture is saying if you don't let your kids play baseball and little league and softball and what's the really one if they're good?
Travel?
Yeah, travel ball. You got to do travel ball. We couldn't afford it, and a lot of stuff. All this undue pressure that is so culturally normal. I'm not saying that it's evil. I want to say that those things in and of themselves aren't evil, but you only have so much of a life.
That's the thing right there. See, we can't make time. We say, well, we'll make time for that. We can't make time, but we can repurpose the time that we do have. So if you find yourself caught up in a situation like this, and this is so common to so many couples and families that I know, you are going to have to adjust your expectations until you can adjust your schedule.
Right.
You're going to have to maybe look for a little less because that other person in your marriage, those other kids that are in your family, they're caught in the same thing too. So you're going to have to change your expectations on what you want out of that relationship because you're all caught in that same cycle. And then begin to work on adjusting your schedule. Decide what really goes. Do all 3 kids even want to play ball?
Yeah, is your job to keep 4 kids happy? Mm-hmm. I can't even keep me happy, and you expect me to keep 4 kids happy. I mean, your wives and husbands, if you don't have children, you know how hard it is just to get along with each other. Then you throw 4 little ankle biters in there. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and see, it's the little stuff that tears us up. There's a guy, I'm just going to leave him at first initial. Pastor T is what some people might call him. And I heard him at a marriage conference once talking about the little foxes. And, of course, this was a poetic verse in a Song of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 15. It says, catch the foxes for us. The little foxes that spoil the vineyards, for our vineyards are in blossom. Man, it's the little things that nip at your heels that take all the good stuff, take all the best fruit from your life. And if you don't start to reevaluate your time, repurpose your time, readjust your schedule, and move the things aside that are less important, it's going to constantly nip at your heels. You're going to constantly feel like something is missing.
But we work, and let me just give you the daddy perspective. Man, I work. I probably work more than I should. Then I come home and I don't get that time, and they want to do something, and out of guilt and shame because I have to work, there I am coming home trying to make them happy. And that guilt, I decided very early on, look, I'm going to be a good dad. When I'm home, I'm going to be home with you, and I'm going to be present. Of course, I was self-employed, so I was always at work. But they knew that when I wasn't there, I didn't have any hobbies. I didn't just go away and do stuff. I laid my life down, so I was able to go, no, you don't get to make me feel guilty. No, you can't do that. I mean, but here's the hard part is if we're not careful, these people have been in this situation. If you focus on where you are or where you've been and you don't make that change, if you don't look and say, what does reprioritization look like in my life? I mean, that's that turning point. Stop looking at the past, look where you are and say, is this where we want to be? If it's not, what do we need to do differently?
And that's it. You've got to stop and be honest, not just with yourself, but with each other. The people in this family. Again, do all the kids want to play ball? You know, maybe they're playing because they think you, the parent, want them to play, and so they're sticking with it. You know, if you get together as a family and you begin to discuss these priorities and look at what really matters, you know, you may find out that there was a lot more room in the center than you even thought.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So it's funny here, and I deal with so many couples who deal with this. In fact, I'm guilty of this. I'm just, so ladies, ladies, if you're hating on them, you're hating on me, you're hating on all of us, but it said it usually fades after 72 hours.
Yep.
Any decisions that we make without structural adaptations can't last. They cannot, no matter how much you want to change. I tell people all the time, what you can't do with inner fortitude, you do with external structure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course it's going to fade because I didn't remove those distractions that come between us and intimacy. This woman in this situation just wants to feel like she's loved and she has that emotional connectivity, and he wants to give it to her, but something has to go. Something is depleting that. It has to go. And most people, quite frankly, for one reason, like I said, guilt or shame or cultural expectation or selfishness. I know I've dealt with men in the past who said, I'm not going to give up my hunting. I'm going, you want to give up your hunting every weekend, or you want to lose your marriage, you idiot? Do you want to spend the rest of your life with a dead deer carcass? Tell me how that's going to work. There's going to be some funny looking little jackalopes you got running around the house. Anyway, but you see my point.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying you can't, but it takes a structural change. You say, well, it's only deer season. I know for you, and listen, I love shooting Bambi as much as the next person. I'll just be straight up. But Bambi ain't worth my marriage when I got Walmart down the road.
Well, and so, this kind of started with pointing to the kids are getting the attention, right? And if they're again, nothing wrong, there's not sinful. And I think if I asked you, how many out of 100 couples that you talk to have experienced this? 100?
Probably.
When it comes to the, I need more emotional attention. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
you get it for a few days and then it falls off. So if we want to love our kids in the best way, we have to prioritize our spouse. Husband and wife, you got to be able to put the other one first. If you can't love that person before the children will suffer the consequences of a destructive and deteriorating marriage.
And here's the catch-22. You can't love them how they need to be loved if you're not spiritually and emotionally healthy in that relationship.
Yeah.
Because the greatest thing you're going to do for those kids is model a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
And you give them this false sense that their spouse is going to do nothing but try to live to make them happy. Kids, close your ears, you don't want to hear this. The Bible says that you should not give a kid everything that they want. You should be intentional about not giving them. In our culture, man, if we don't give our kids everything they want, we feel like we're failures. And gentlemen, that goes for your wife too. I'm kidding. It doesn't say that, I don't think. I'll rewrite it to make it say it. In fact, Matthew 19 says this. I think it really kind of sums it up. For this reason, a man will leave his father and his mother. This is a structural reprioritization of his entire life. Think about that.
Yeah.
You're saying, God, I'm changing my mama and my entire reference point. For a man will leave his father and his mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. We know what that means. So they are no longer two, but one. And I struggle so often hearing people going, and I hear ladies say this, I hear men say this. They say, I feel like I'm losing my identity. And the reason they feel like they're losing their identity is because their identity is often somewhere it shouldn't be in the first place. Their identity is associated with an activity. And they see if they give up that activity and that temporary pleasure, they're giving up an aspect of their identity. That's why there's such an identity crisis in America right now. But he begins, he says, so no longer the two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one. So when it says let no one separate, does that include the kids?
Yep.
So can I, and here's a question, can I adequately and godly love my wife and my children?
Absolutely.
What's the balance?
Her first, God first, her second, children third, right? And so kids are always, right? It's not that they're less than, but again, the loving them the best way possible is to show them how to love your spouse, how to love their wife, how to love their husband when they grow up. If you don't do that, you're setting them up for failure in their marriage. You're setting them up to repeat the same mistakes you're making, and they'll justify it. based on behavior they've seen, right? Not just because like, oh, this is the example I've been given, but it was the example I've been given, and somehow my parents made it through it, so it must be okay, right? It's not the best model, and we fail them in the attempt to give them all that we want and all the opportunities in sports and character building and friendship building. We end up setting the marriage aside, but yet the marriage is the thing that brought these kids into the world in the first place.
Right.
And if we lose the core of that family, we lose the whole family falls apart. So we have to prioritize the core.
Well, the church, used to, and this is something that we try to do, and we try to keep a balance of, which is very, very difficult, because the church, I'm not saying the mission, but the church itself can become such a structure in the life of a family that there can be so much going on that it's actually counterintuitive to the family. The church itself and being constantly active can be destructive. But another point I want to make concerning the kids. Anybody who has more than one kid, eventually, if not habitually, the kids will ask, who's your favorite kid? You know what I'm saying? I got one who asked me.
They just make up their mind. We didn't ask when we were kids. We just decided who was the favorite.
Yeah. I mean, and they all have their suspicions, but they want to know. Just validate me. Daddy, am I your favorite? You are my favorite one with this name. Yes. Yep. You see. So that's the idea. And I want to say this, and just so we can bring clarity. I am not saying that you love your children less than you love your spouse. We're not talking about a girth. We're talking about priority, okay? I have a lot of priorities in my life, but there is a structure to those priorities. All of them may be detrimental. You need food and water, right? Mm-hmm. Which one do you need the most?
Water.
And yes, you see my point.
Yeah.
But do you die without food?
After a while.
You do. See, same thing. So we look and go, well, water's more important than food. Water is more timely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But the value, it's not a value. It's kind of a different animal that we're able to conceive and deal with as humans that animals can't. That's why we eat them. All right, we better move on.
I guess I want to talk about just real quick why this happens a lot. I think why we fall into it is one, because we do love our kids. We want to do all the things for them. But when you've got two relationships, when you've got a spousal relationship and you've got a child relationship, you know that child accepts you more, loves you more, is more responsive to your word. Like there's friction, there's past hurts and trust issues with that spouse. So you've got to reconcile issues, and you've got to choose to prioritize that person who your marriage is about the vows you made. It's not about the vows they made. Like how I live out my life with my wife is dependent on the vows that I said. Like I made a vow. It doesn't matter if she wants to walk away. I have to be willing to love her at all costs. So that's hard though. When you got 15 years in and there's been some hurts, there's been some failings, there's been that accusation that comes around every couple of weeks. You're still not giving me the attention I need. Oh, well, the kids love when I give them attention, and it's just easier to do that. And we take the path of least resistance when it comes to those relationship choices. And so we need to be careful about that.
So somebody's in this situation, mm-hmm. They're in this room, they want to make a shift. Let's give them 3 keys for making a hard relational shift to make that adjustment. They've got kids, they've got all these priorities, they've got obligations. 1 key for a hard shift. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. They got to come into agreement that this is not where they want to continue to be, like you said, right? So, and in coming to that agreement, okay, we have now defined A. We do not want to continue to stay in A. We want to make it to B and eventually to C, right? We got to create, what's the path? All right, there are this many blocks in our path. And you said, you may have to adjust your expectations for a season, right? Because you signed up for some things, because you're committed to some things, because you're going to fail obligations to other people that are temporary, and we don't want to fall on our word anywhere. So we got to uphold our obligations unless they are really, really causing issues. So you adjust your expectations for a season, but then you put a plan in place to get there.
So there's 2 keys. So first, come into agreement. Mm-hmm. Second, develop a plan.
Correct.
Now, Dan?
And just to build on that, besides developing a plan, you got to act on that plan. That has got to be what you're going to do. You know, we like you said, we realize this is not where we want to be. We want to be over here. We agree that over here is going to be better for everyone involved. But you've got to take steps one at a time to get to that place. And you will have to let some things go, and you'll have to decide what is really priority in your family. You know, as a family, you may have to decide these things.
As you're making the list, as you're coming to the conclusion and you're doing this, remember that unity is the goal. I've seen so many people who try to do exactly what we're talking about, and a wedge comes about just by agreeing. So understand that what you're trying to do, if both of you understand that you're doing this for the betterment of your relationship, this is as you're building the plan, as you're building what to delete, and then you ask yourselves in agreement, what is a negotiable and what is a non-negotiable? One of the activities, for instance, if you're a family and your children, one activity that should not be a negotiable is going to church. You say, well, you're saying that because I'm a pastor. Yes, and it's my job to tell you to go to church. The Bible says that forsake not the assembling of yourselves together. That is a priority. If you believe it's a priority for you and you want it to be a priority in their future, it has to be a priority in your family. That means if you have something that is competing with a priority, it has to go. You have to be in agreement with that. I know so many people who literally don't come to church because they choose to do something else in opposition to what the Word says. Never have I not seen them suffer for doing it. It's always proven detrimental. So come into agreement, what is negotiable, what is non-negotiable. Once you get those, then you begin the painful process of extraction, reminding yourself of why you're doing it. Yeah. So I'll give you the principle of the rose, the principle of pruning. The idea is you can have a rose bush with 25 mediocre flowers. Or you can cut away all of the resources that are extended to preserve and keep and grow those flowers, and you can grow something spectacular and beautiful. And that's the idea of a marriage, that God has formed two people to cut away and resist running after things and sending energy in ways and dedicating their lives to things that will detract from making that beautiful marriage, that beautiful relationship that God desired. And once we're done, once we've been distracted and we've poured out our lives and we've lost our relational capital, then those children that we invested everything in, they leave and we're left with each other with no relationship, trying to build from ground zero.
Yeah, you know, both Jesus and Paul spoke to this. Jesus said, you know, when he was asked, what's the greatest commandment? Well, you love the Lord your God with all that you have, with all that's within you. And second, you love others like you love yourself. Then Paul took that, and in 1 Peter, he says, husbands, you love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. We have got to be willing to die on the sword of what we really want. You know, we've got to be willing to put that away.
Yeah.
And make that our priority. Make our priority to love God. Make it our priority as husbands to love our spouses. And take that a little bit deeper on into our family and realize that there is more to this. That love and unity is the biggest thing we got to be concerned with.
So you're telling me that my wife and I should be able to come into agreement to have an older car or a lesser house in order to have a better relationship?
This isn't a conversation you just had or something.
Yeah. So it's one that we have had forever.
Yes. The agreement is important. You have to agree on these priorities because you all recognize the problem. The husband and the wife, all three of these kids in this particular scenario, they know what the problem is. Nobody's getting enough of anybody else. That's good. So you have got to decide what's important. You know, whether that wife working a part-time job for whatever reason that job exists or that money comes in for, is that as important as we thought it was now that we realize where we've landed?
Yeah, because if you didn't have to pay all the little league fees, you wouldn't need all the money. I'm sorry. All right. You've got another scenario that's probably worse than this one.
Yeah, maybe.
We'll try to.
All right, so Christian husband and wife of 10 years, 2 daughters, 7 and 3. Husband works 50 to 60 hours a week. He's the guy that's always on call. He's a volunteer firefighter. He meets all the family's financial needs. Wife stays at home to homeschool the kids and manage the home. Their relationship, while loving and respectful, lacks regular intimacy. They make time for intimacy maybe 1 or 2 times a month, 3 if they're lucky. The husband's resentment builds over time, and the wife feels like a failure, but is so exhausted it's hard to find the energy. They both have compassion for the other's need for rest and physical contact, but the pattern continues.
Same problem. It's the same problem, I'm sorry. And here's the thing. They figured out how to make it on one income. Mm-hmm. They figured out how to give their children the preferred education they want to give them.
What's
now,
best. They feel like what's best.
So
right?
They know how to agree on things. They know how to make things work. Now they have to figure out how to prioritize each other in this relationship. Mm-hmm. And I give it to them. They've already figured these other two things out. They know how to come into agreement on things.
That's a good observation. They're sacrificial by nature, yeah.
And that wife that's staying home to homeschool the kids, man, she's working just as hard. Mm. There needs to be a little unity at the end of the day. And it may not mean intimacy today, but it means they need to come together and they need to be the parents and they need to be the husband and wife in those moments that they have.
Yeah. Well, and so there's a lot there. The first part is if you want the big intimacy, you got to have lots of regular little intimacy, right?
You're dancing around.
Exactly.
I'm saying like constant touch leads to greater touch, right? So if the accusation has been there before, you only touch me when you're ready for, right? That's not a good sign of intimacy in the marriage, right? That's a sign of like there's only one type of intimacy that works for you, and yet your spouse needs the other. And so before you leave for work, when you come home for work, the last person you leave and the first person you should be coming home to is that spouse. Again, making them the priority. There should be touch there, whether it's a kiss, whether it's an embrace, whatever it is. There should be, like me and my wife, our hands just do not work together for holding hands. We last about 20 seconds, maybe.
Sweaty palms.
Ever. It just doesn't work, man. I'm like, my hands are too bony, whatever. I don't know. But so we just can't do that. But you figure out what works. What can your spouse, what works for them, and you do that. One of the things we didn't really kind of cover in that first scenario is for this to work, you have to believe that your partner's, that your spouse's concerns matter, right? That's why it only lasts 72 hours because it wasn't a big enough deal for him, right? But let him go 72 hours without some physical touch, and he can all of a sudden relate.
Oh yeah.
So we need to adopt the other person's, and this couple they understand the priority. They're able to be empathetic to the situation. They literally just can't muster the strength to do it on a regular basis. No pun intended. So
what part of that is duty? Because I hear this all the time.
Well,
deal with this quite a bit. I think you've got a scripture for us.
Do, yeah.
God loves us, man. I'm just going to tell you, ladies, God loves us. Let's see what Jesus says about this. You got a verse for us?
It's 1 Corinthians 7, 3 through 5. And it starts with the husband. Men who are duty-driven, the husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband.
A marital duty, for those who don't understand.
Marital, yes.
Marital
It's
duty.
using the word, it's not saying man and woman, it's saying husband and wife.
That's right? Relations.
Exactly. So the wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband.
What?
In the same way, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife.
What?
Do not deprive each other except perhaps by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. It's specific in instruction there. So you may devote yourselves to prayer. Then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control.
Okay. So there's some elements. There's some functional elements out there that God knows consist within the human animal and with relationships. So there's obvious temptations that happen when there's a lack of intimacy. Okay? So in our culture, oh my gracious, it's everywhere. So we see that. So he makes a provision and says you don't want to set somebody up unnecessarily for failure and unnecessary temptation. He says who's behind it. Satan himself, through the temptation, lust of the eye, lust of the flesh, and the pride of life, has a tendency to all of this is a warning against not being intentional about preserving not only physical, but there's an element here that's expected. As the physical happens, there will be that emotional. Now, I don't know if I said this I feel like I've said this recently, but please bear with me if I've heard it. Very often, women want to connect because they feel close. Men want to connect in order to feel close. Now, just let that kind of resonate. Most of the guys in here go, yeah, I do. I feel closer when we're getting close. And most women are going, well, I don't feel close, so I just feel like I'm being used. Well, that works both ways. The key is the unity, and they both want the same thing. I want to feel close. Now, something in our culture that has happened, I don't know how recent this is, I haven't been around that long, but the idea is I'll show him, I'll withhold. No, you're doing yourself a disfavor, whether that's the man or the woman. And I will tell you, I've seen that work in both instances. I've seen that in both cases where they withhold, and it can become leverage or punishment, which is evidence of a lack of the intimacy that's necessary in the relationship being right in the first place. So God built in this scriptural fail-safe just for this particular thing. So how long does it say that you should not go without intimacy? What do y'all read into this? Let's get some theology going on here.
It says for a time. It says for a time.
Right.
Agree, but it said mutual consent, right? So
But we have to be praying.
Yeah, that's
How long
it.
can you pray?
Yeah, nobody in here can pray more than 3 days. So don't tell me that you do 72 hours in prayer, ladies, and we'll let you go. But I don't say, no, I'm
Look, man, I want to sympathize with this couple a little bit because they're trying to do some right things.
They are.
This guy has got a job. He's on call beyond the job. There are people in here who are military now. They understand that. And even firefighters and law enforcement in here, they understand this thing. You're just trying to do the right thing. So just keep this in mind. Intimacy is not some switch that you can flip, and that's what her complaint is. He expects now he's going to come home, he's got 14 minutes and something's going to happen, and that's just not the way it works. So you both got a phone. You could have fun innuendos that you share over tonight.
Tell us more.
Charles is going to be on call tonight. You're off the hook, dude. Try sending a few innuendos, grease the skids a little bit, What's the median age in here?
Yeah, we need to be careful with what skids we're greasing around. Yeah,
but, or maybe Saturday afternoon. Your girls are going to be at a birthday party. Now you've got a window of time you can work toward. You can find a way to meet each other's needs and expectations if you just think a little differently.
I love the point that you made, because I really believe this is Christian family. I think that's who we're talking to predominantly, are Christian folks. They want things to go well. They want to do things right. They want to have those priorities, and sometimes so staunchly upholding and keeping those priorities and those schedules. My life for years revolved around the schedules of my 4 nappy-headed kids. I'm just going to tell you, it was exhausting. Yeah. I was like, there's eat time, wake time, play time. I'm like, where's the Tony time? I mean, there's that patience. But I got to what you said. I call it date the girl. You got to date the girl. You steal and you make time, and you're intentional about those things that are valuable. And men, I'll just give you a little key. When you do what they don't expect, it is always a plus. And I'm not talking about brownie points to move towards an end. I'm talking about following the leading of the Holy Spirit when He prompts you to stop and get something on the way home. Or He prompts you to, when you walk in, instead of asking if supper is done, to grab your wife, hit Lady in Red on your cell phone, start playing.
They'd probably just settle for us putting the game controller down at this point, right?
Yeah.
The bar's pretty low if this is the state of your marriage.
Did you say
right?
putting the game controller?
Yeah, this is
I thought you said he worked
issue.
60 hours.
I'm just saying. It's how we spend our spare time that really kills us.
I have seen couples divorce over PlayStations.
Yeah.
I'm just.
So real quick, in your experience as a counselor, where's the first place the man's mind goes when this is not happening in the marriage?
I guess that would depend on the man.
Okay. I'm just like, again.
But I think the assessment is accurate. There's almost some resentment.
Yeah. So in my experience, resentment, and then the immediate, let me find the substitute, because the substitute is readily available on your cell phone at this point, right?
I've got something I really need to say, and I really don't know how to say this. something that my wife and I, and Kim, I'm going to say this with your mercy, so don't stand up and embarrass me, but something that we agreed on, and I know there's some young kids in here, was the idea. Okay, I think I got it. All right, this is not going to be a short video.
Thread the needle.
It was the idea that I am saying, and not you. I'm saying, you.
Not that kind of church.
You are all that I will ever experience from this day forward. Let's make it good. Let's make it frequent. And I need you, baby love, to understand that if we're not, it's not. If you're not, there are no other options on the table for me, not even to entertain within my heart. So that puts us, we're literally men when we come to that conclusion. And I hope every man in here has come to that conclusion. And I hope every woman has realized that he has put himself in that position to say, I am abandoning myself to you. Help me. I want you. I'm willing enough to say, I am willing for you to be it. Because sometimes ladies goes, well, I just don't feel desirable. It doesn't matter what you feel like, trust me. I didn't marry you because of how you fit. Well, I should stop.
Yeah, you should stop. Right. So in your experience, do you know where the women's mind usually goes?
Yes, how can I get him to make more money is what, no, I'm kidding. Very often women, I've never seen a woman be upset because of what they considered legitimate pursuit. Mm-hmm. I've never seen a woman when they feel like he is literally, that he's trying to love her well. And what I mean is loving her well is not, we're not talking about the act of marriage at that point. We're talking about all of those things that culminate in the relationship that lead to the act of marriage. When you men are being merciful and you're being kind and you're being gentle and you're being forgiving and you're doing those things, what did you say? Greasing the skids, whether you know it or not. If
you don't have to quote me on that.
And here's
in the battlefield.
And here's the dichotomy. I'm trying not to, this guy here is trying to keep his priorities, be godly, not be a butthead, but he's dealing with those frustrations and, he's going, help me. You got to rescue me. And sometimes that's what God says is you need to rescue each other.
Yeah. So in my experience, what's been expressed to me in these seasons where this doesn't occur is the woman's mind can easily go to suspicion. Oh, he already has replaced me.
If he's withholding,
right?
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or not interested.
Exactly. Or I'm no longer attractive to him. He's not interested in me.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, and then there's that negative self-talk, and it becomes
and this
detrimental really quick.
Ladies, let me give you a little hint. If you're not in the mood today, or you have a headache, or you're exhausted, or there's some legitimate reason that you want to avoid intimacy, and you reject him until you invite him, he feels rejected. Did you hear that? Until you say, will you please, he only hears, no, you can't. Now, any guy in here will tell you this. If they don't, they're lying or I'm out of my mind, which could be possible too. But when you say no and I'm rejecting you, we wait for an invitation or we feel like we're trespassing. Mm-hmm. Would you guys say?
A man who's respecting his wife.
Yeah, a man who's respecting. So, but men, listen to this. Just because she's in a bad mood or having a moment one day doesn't mean that she doesn't desire for you to be the initiator. Okay? They enjoy, at least from what I know, when it's a healthy person, they enjoy being pursued. That's how you got her to begin with. They want to feel like you're loved. So many instances in the Bible we see where God, and in the Song of Solomon, where he was pursuing. But when a man feels like he's been rejected, it really inhibits his ability to pursue. And we're like, well, what do I do? Now I feel like I'm forcing something on her. And I'll just tell you, ladies, men don't want you to feel like it's an obligation, even if it is. It's a secret. I don't want you to feel like this is
it's duty.
It's a duty, but I'm a mercy, whatever you want to call it. All right, closing thoughts. We're well beyond. We should have quit 3 minutes ago.
Yeah, going right back. Priorities. Because if you decide, we've gotten off track. This is not how we intended it to be. You declare where you are. Say, you know what? Our priorities need to be different. If you come into agreement, anything is accomplishable by two people who can come into agreement about we're not where we want to be, and we need to find a way to get there.
So same principle with the other, identify the problem, come into agreement that you won't change.
Yeah.
You want something different.
And one more thing. This is not an extra. Like, this is an essential in the marriage, right?
That's huge. That's huge.
In fact, this was probably the main driving point to the marriage in the first place.
Nobody gets
whether
married
you
to
were
not-
waiting on it or whether you were cheating to get there. I'm just saying, it was probably the main driver for the motivation to get married in the first place.
Did you just say that out loud?
I said it out loud.
All right. Dan, how are you going to fix that?
Well, I can only speak to American culture because that's the only one I live in. So this is a really common scenario, both of these in American families right now, where there's a lot of things missing, but there's a lot of things happening too. They've learned in both these marriages how to do a lot of things to get the outcome that they want, right?
Yep.
They've learned how to juggle all these things, how to get the house they want, how to get the education they want, all the things. They need to take that same energy and apply that to the relationship in the home.
Right.
You know, they need to do a lot of things to get the outcome they want in their relationship, both with each other and with their kids as well.
Yeah, be creative. You know, everything on the table, and I think I love that. So functionally, practically, one, you said come into agreement, acknowledge the problem, come up with a clear plan. Dan, I love what you just said there. Have you got it?
No, there's nothing.
Okay.
There's nothing.
I'll say this kind of as a closing point. I want to reiterate what you said. This is not the icing. This is the cake. The reason I say that, God designed this. There's something spiritual that happens when a husband and a wife connect physically. There's barriers that are broken. There's forgiveness and a mercy that is extended. I don't know exactly how it works, but it is often, this is why you hear people say, well, when you fight, you make up, you have relations, and it's almost like an Etch-a-Sketch in your relationship. And even though you may not feel like doing that, when you've agreed that you're okay and you want the emotions and the feelings to align, that is almost greasing the skids on the emotions to get back where they're supposed to be. I've seen that time and time. It is a cleaning of the slate somehow. I don't know exactly how it works, but most of you have experienced it, and you know it's true. It basically is you saying, you know what, we are okay. Let's give it another shot. So I would suggest that every single married couple go home tonight and give it another good cleaning. Give it another good shot. All right. We're going to get ahead. Listen, thank you so much, guys. Listen, if you need prayer mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, if there's something that we can pray and agree with you on, God wants you to have a good relationship with Him and a good relationship with those around you. God bless you. We love you. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow or this weekend. God bless you.